Hello and welcome to Inconvenient Truth. This is an investigation into the origins of the COVID-19 outbreak as part of the full-scale international investigation which is in progress at the moment. And I would like to draw our attention to some of the most compelling evidence which has so far been overlooked. This is by other people looking into this subject, and I therefore would like to draw your attention to this article by Newsweek that was published in April of 2020, which states that Dr. Fauci backed controversial Wuhan lab with US dollars for risky coronavirus research. And I repeat, Dr. Fauci backed controversial Wuhan lab with US dollars for risky coronavirus research. And this is the Wuhan Institute of Virology, of course. Now, here we have Dr. Fauci, the familiar face, and reading from the article here, it's very clearly that just last year the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the organization led by Dr. Fauci, funded scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology and other institutions for work on gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses. And it's the gain-of-function research terminology which sent alarm bells ringing, because this refers to the ramping up of viruses to make them more virulent, more deadly, more transmissible variants than their original form. And goes on to say that in 2019, with the backing of NIAID, the National Institutes of Health committed 3.7 million over 6 years for research that included some gain-of-function work. The program followed another 3.7 million 5-year project for collecting and studying bat coronaviruses, which ended in 2019, bringing the total to 7.4 million. So that obviously started around 2014, which is very convenient timing. And what's interesting to note at this stage is that gain-of-function research is nothing new. A lot of my own investigations, I have discovered that gain-of-function research appears to be quite clearly ancient. And I say this because Jesus Christ himself was a well-known healer, famous for helping the crippled walk, the blind to see, and raising the dead. Very clearly himself posed a significant obstacle to medical mafia profits. And the evidence for this is basically that gain-of-function research is ancient history, established 2,000 years ago with the crucifixion of Christ, destroying cures for all cancers, smoking-related illnesses, stroke, terminal illnesses of every kind, replacing robust cures with partially effective alternatives, carefully designed not to work, to maximize profits by exploiting terminally ill patients, with the specific intention of turning a large number of curable illnesses into terrifying untreatable terminal diseases, and in the process establishing corrupt institutions such as Cancer Research, who very clearly collect huge sums of money for cures that they just destroyed and crucified, which was all part of a masterminding medical mafia takeover, stroke world domination, stroke new world order, depopulation agenda as of several millennia ago. So this gain-of-function research, as I say, appears to have some long-established roots in our past, and much like the elephant in the living room, appears to be such a big issue that people miss it very easily. And we see this is the re-emergence of this gain-of-function research. This is in the 80s, and I say this because we now have mounting evidence to suggest that HIV was specifically designed to outwit our immune system. In other words, HIV itself was man-made, with the specific intention of creating a virus that we are unable to form a permanent antibody response to in order to maximize profits for drug companies. And the evidence to support this, as I say, is accumulating daily at the moment. This is an article published by the Independent newspaper in 2010, which highlights the fact that Big Pharma and the business of HIV and AIDS is a very long, well-established, lucrative business. And it says here, antiretrovirals have been a lucrative product for the world's biggest drug companies. And I suggest it may well be the biggest profit that, or the most lucrative exercise that they embark on. And the other evidence that I've found to support this comes in the form of clues to suggest that the story we were given about monkeys and this disease jumping from a monkey was fabricated in the first place, much like in the same way we discovered that the virus jumping from a bat to a human was nothing more than total bullshit. The story of HIV jumping from a monkey from a human to a human may also be total bullshit, quite simply because Dr. Fauci was looking for a scapegoat to hide the fact that he himself made the virus. And I say this because monkeys are the first port of call and the first choice for scientists, the first choice of subject when it comes to vaccine trials. And evidence for this is abundant. I've just put in here as a Google search, monkeys, vaccine experiments. The first option comes up, COVID-19 vaccine research is facing a monkey shortage, to suggest to you that they are a very important resource when it comes to vaccine research, or the most important resource. Second option says, did the Oxford vaccine, work in monkeys? Yes, I mean, basically making viruses, playing with viruses and manipulating viruses and creating vaccines, all part and parcel of monkey research, and therefore the easiest scapegoat to use when it comes to fabricating excuses for making viruses. And this is constructing and creating man-made viruses to evade our immune system. And what we see now, this is further evidence, this is going back to the which acts as a backdrop and a precursor to the arrival of COVID-19 some 10 years later. Big Pharma and the big business of HIV and AIDS, which in the first paragraph here points out that the cost of treating HIV with antiretrovirals has plummeted during the past decade. Like, oh dear, prices for the 6 most common initial treatments or first-line drugs in low and middle income countries fell by between 1 and 36% from 2008 to 2009 alone, according to the World Health Organization. So what we see there is a very significant spur and motive for Dr. Fauci then to turn his man-made sexually transmitted HIV into something airborne, which will then automatically turn every customer on Earth, every person on Earth into a customer for his HIV business. And what I am suggesting is the slump in profits coincides with making HIV virus airborne. This is simply gain-of-function research, manipulating the genetic sequences, placing them inside a coronavirus in order to turn a sexually transmitted infection, which affects only a small minority of people, into an airborne infection, an airborne virus, which very conveniently turns every person on Earth into an HIV patient, thereby maximizing his profits to staggering degrees. And further evidence to support this rather nasty discovery comes in the form by the Indian Institute of Technology, which, if I go just to the beginning here, this is titled Uncanny Similarity of Unique Inserts in the 2019 ENCOV Spike Protein to HIV. Now, these were the first scientists to get their hands on a sample of the virus in November 2019. It's a very famous, very reputable institution in India who did a very comprehensive investigation and analysis of the virus and published their report in this article here. The link I shall leave in the description. And states very clearly in the first paragraph of the paper that, I quote, the finding of 4 unique inserts in the 2019 ENCOV, all of which have identity/similarity to amino acid residues in key structural proteins of HIV-1, is unlikely to be fortuitous in nature. And I repeat, is unlikely to be fortuitous in nature. So they are saying straight off the bat that it's extremely unlikely HIV should just turn up in a coronavirus overnight as if by magic, and would usually take hundreds if not thousands of years, and we would find intermediary examples, but of course there's no such evidence of this, and every indication that this is a carefully manipulated man-made creation. And further evidence of this is in the article where they pop this virus into their 3D modeling equipment at the university, or sorry, the institute in India, and coloured the 4 HIV insertions with these 4 different colours just to show you where they are and how abundant they are. And I read from the bottom here, the inserts from HIV envelope protein are shown with coloured beads present at the binding site of the protein. And this is insert 1 red, insert 2 yellow, insert 3 orange, insert 4 green. So this virus lights up with a Christmas tree, you know, like a Christmas tree when we examine the HIV components. And the last thing to note here, which is maybe even more suspicious, is the fact that this article has withdrawn written all across it. This is clearly suggesting, or clearly suggestive of the fact that Dr. Fauci himself has paid for this very well written article and extremely well researched paper to be sabotaged and withdrawn, or at least have this stamp plonked across it, quite simply because he is trying to cover his tracks and hide clues that show that he himself has been manipulating his own HIV virus with a view to making it airborne and practicing gain of function research in order to make this more virulent, more deadly, more transmissible, etc. As we see, it just says withdrawn all across it. So yes, my suggestion is to you that Dr. Fauci himself paid for that sabotage himself personally. And the reasons for this very clearly appear to be inspired by this philosophy that preventative medicine kills return business. And this could be Dr. Fauci himself standing here teaching us the lesson that he is acutely aware of, being that, of course, robust, effective cures for any terminal illness provide a very serious obstacle for less compassionate professionals to exploit the sick. And this is by his own admission, as we see here. This is Dr. Fauci, who, as I say, by his own admission, states in this quote here that the development of a moderately effective vaccine, together with optimal implementation of existing treatment and prevention modalities, could end the current HIV pandemic. And I repeat, development of a moderately effective vaccine, together with optimal implementation of existing treatment and prevention modalities, could end the current HIV pandemic. Now, reading between the lines, that's fairly obvious. I mean, he says could end the current HIV pandemic, which is highly unlikely, of course, given that the treatments he is using are deliberately designed to be partially effective. And this will, of course, maximize his profits and provide practically no chance of the patient actually recovering, while, of course, at the same time providing him 100% assurance that he can maximize his profits. So there he is, by his own admission, talking about partially effective treatments in the treatment of terminal illnesses. And we see more evidence of this in CBS News only a few days ago, on the 24th of January 2021, where they go back to a clip of Dr. Fauci in the 1980s talking about his HIV creation and what is highly likely to be his creation. And I urge you to listen very closely to what Dr. Fauci is saying, because it very clearly appears to be a repeat of the same narrative that we've been hearing in connection with COVID-19 that he put together back in the 80s.
Fauci and I first met on camera. Remote interviews were still something of a novelty, and the nation was fixated on a global epidemic called HIV/AIDS.
What degree of optimism do you have about some kind of vaccine?
2 vaccines are in phase 1 trial to determine safety, but it won't be until well into the 1990s. If we're lucky enough to have a vaccine, it won't be at least until 1995.
Even 33 years ago, Tony Fauci had a wide national following, but mostly among AIDS activists who were often highly critical.
Often highly critical. Well, it just shows that AIDS activists were very suspicious, even back in the 80s, that there was foul play going on behind the scenes in relation to HIV and the AIDS pandemic. And the very fact that Dr. Fauci is there just very clearly reiterating and repeating the exact same narrative that we hear in relation to COVID-19. They're back in the 80s, word for word, this time in relation to HIV. So the indication is here that yes, he's just repeating the same well-rehearsed narrative, in full knowledge, of course, that he's talking about the same thing. You know, I mean, HIV put into a coronavirus only requires a mild tweak to the narrative, and such a small tweak that we can hardly notice the difference. Now, what's interesting to note now, just in this next part of the clip, which just follows directly on from what I've just played you, is that suddenly Dr. Fauci is making comparisons between himself and some saintly figure like Jesus Christ. And this is to say Fauci has replaced himself with Jesus Christ, has quite simply removed him as an obstacle to progress and to profits, and replaced him with himself in this, what is very clearly, I think, evidence of the establishment of an antichrist government and a satanic...
To the best of my recollection, he had not yet inspired any videos, t-shirts, coffee mugs, or suggestions of impending sainthood.
Oh my goodness.
A little more pensive.
My nuns in Our Lady of Guadalupe in Brooklyn would be turning over in their grave when they see that.
And then of course, we have the other kind. In case you can't read it from all the way over there. No. Say no to the prick, it says.
I believe Dr. Fauci has manufactured the coronaviruses.
Co-worker that we just heard then very briefly saying that she believes that Dr. Fauci manufactured the viruses himself. And as I say, this is a woman that worked very closely alongside Dr. Fauci for many years, and they suddenly fell out for reasons I'm not too clear about. But yes, what we see there, I believe, is a very interesting reference to this gain of function research that, as I say, I was talking about at the beginning of this video. And just before we go, I'd just like to remind us of the progress that we have made in this video, which I believe represents the most significant advancement in the investigation of this the source of COVID-19, certainly in comparison to other investigations happening at the moment. And therefore, I suggest that we have found the source of COVID-19, motivation and inspiration, exposed the hidden history of medical mafia corruption and gain of function research, and laid the crime wide open for further investigation. And let's face it, I think we've all been aware somewhere in our minds that there is a very serious crime, if not the most serious crime ever committed, in progress here since COVID-19 hit our streets in January 2020. And this is in spite of the fact that many are even too nervous to mention it. And therefore, I suggest that this video represents, a very genuine chance of returning to normal, and increases our chances of returning to normal dramatically. I therefore encourage any budding detectives out there to join me in this investigation and help push this forward for the benefit of all humanity, and to simply raise our chances of returning to some kind of normality in the not so distant future. And on that note, I shall thank you for watching.